You don't have to have it that close to your mouth anymore. I turned it up louder.
Oh.
And John wants to see your face in the camera. Oh, yeah. Gelman wants to see your face in the camera.
I feel like today is going to be...
Welcome to Emotion Ships.
Who cares what I feel? Go on.
Where we talk about the real reason everything happens for a reason. I'm your host, Charlie Carroll, along with my courageous co-host.
Oh, that's nice.
Mallory Redmond.
Why? Because I came back.
Now, welcome to the program.
Thanks.
I just thought that you shouldn't get that out until we were going, so I wanted to get everything rolling.
Get what out? My feelings?
Well, yes, you were going to say something.
It was about your brain.
Welcome to episode 36. What's going on over there?
Well, you keep interrupting my feelings with
sorry.
welcoming people to things.
Welcome in, everyone, to episode 36. Speaking of brains, new study out this morning about COVID patients, and nearly 1/3 of COVID patients had an altered mental state. And based on that, 89% of them who had this altered mental state struggled much more than those who did not have an altered mental state. And so I was reading this on this psychological site that talks about just everything oriented around neurology and the brain. And it was very interesting.
I need more information. What are you saying?
What they haven't gotten the full conclusion. They haven't drawn a conclusion to it. But what they were talking about is just the impact. This was early on. The study was in March. They were talking about the psychological impact of how you processed COVID and how it severely affected your ability to recover from it.
If you were like really anxious?
If you were really anxious, and just in March, obviously there was so much that we did not know about the virus. 2 weeks ago, the CDC, for those who are wondering, and you can look it up about these statistics, came out and said that now mortality rates, worst case, 72 plus years old is 0.054. So half of 1% if you're 72 years old and older. From 0 to 54, it was 0.00028. And so we know that now, that there's not a high mortality rate. But back in March, with everything, if you remember.
Oh, I remember.
Everything we were seeing coming out of Italy, heck, we thought it could be a 20 to 30% mortality rate.
Sure.
And so this study that just came out where they looked at 500, and we'll put it in the notes for those of you that are curious. They studied 509 people. I don't know why 509.
That doesn't seem like very many people.
Well, but think about it. It was March. There wasn't a lot of people that were positive that they could study at the time. But it was out of Northwestern, which is a very respectable medical institution. Mm-hmm. Just looking at the impact of the brain and how people were processing having COVID. And so it was interesting because they were also talking about the role and impact of systemic inflammation and its role on the brain. And what we talk about here on Emotion Ships, the podcast, is the real reason everything happens for a reason, meaning often we think things just happen without a reason behind them. And a lot of people just will say or make that comment, well, everything happens for a reason, which is true, but often it's deeper than what we think it is. And so what we have said in the past, and for those of you listening this morning or whenever you're listening to this, thoughts are food. And in the same way, food can produce inflammation all throughout our body to include our brain, so can our thoughts. Yeah. And this study was just showing how your thoughts really do matter. And as I tell my children on a regular basis, our thoughts require attention because thoughts are not facts. They can be, but it doesn't mean they are, right? And so we have to develop a good filter system to run our thoughts through to just see whether or not they're facts or not. Because you can set your brain on fire. You can set your body on fire by having endless thoughts that are threats. And what a lot of people don't know, I was just talking to someone about their results. They went to Body Garage Dayton and got a hormone test, or actually a hormone test, and then also a blood panel, and their cortisol levels, or not cortisol, though that is true, their cortisol and cholesterol levels came back, and they mentioned to me what the traditional doctor says, and it's your bad cholesterol is high. And what I try to remind people is there is no such thing as bad cholesterol. There's a number where we don't want your cholesterol, and just because it goes above that doesn't mean cholesterol is bad. For those of you that have not heard me talk about this in the past, cholesterol is like your body's suppression, like fire suppression system. It's like a fire extinguisher. And what's amazing, and this is an example of when you profitize something, like we have our medical community or our medical services, the industry, you end up just reorienting everything. Everything gets a different name based on what can be sold. And so when it comes to cholesterol is what puts fires out. It's what puts inflammation out. And so it would be the equivalent of a fire starting. Your fire suppression system works. Everything gets wet because it's putting the fire out. And then we call Service Pro in and complain about the water. You don't have a water problem. You have a fire problem, and your body did its job. And so when you look at heart disease and you look at a lot of brain disease, diseases that are oriented around neurology and the brain, like dementia, Alzheimer's, you tend to find people that worried a lot. You tend to find people that didn't sleep well, meaning their brain could not detox in the middle of the night. You tend to find people that could never stop because their identity and value was wrapped up in how others felt about them or what they could do and accomplish. And so inflammation, what I'm doing is I'm bringing it all back to the idea that thoughts are also food for ourselves. And one of the ways our body tries to keep us clean and whole or healthy is that it releases inflammation. Everything that the body does is good, but when it gets out of context or it gets stuck in an unhealthy state, then it can become bad. So systemic inflammation that's always turned on because you always have pathogens, whether it's from the food you eat, the environment you're in, the people you hang out with, the thoughts that you think. The body's response to that is send fire in, send inflammation, heat in to burn that up, to clean things out, and to get this person whole again. And so in this sense, we're just getting back to this idea of it is important to manage our thoughts because it's often not what we go through that kills us, but how we respond to what we go through that can kill us.
That was a good line.
Lots of words there.
Yeah, no, that was good. Okay. In light of where you began with the COVID tests,
Sure,
or the data, I guess what's interesting or what strikes me is that is the low mortality rate, at least in like the circles that I'm in, is not necessarily a very big topic of conversation right now. Like it's still very fear driven.
Sure.
And so if people are feeling fear and this data is out there, like where's the disconnect? Is it that they feel stuck in their fear and they can't like seek out actual like truth, or they don't want to? Like what can you make that connection?
I think it's noise, right? One of the tactics of war, and this has been for thousands of years, is create enough noise to disorient people. And then you can try to direct them or steer them the way that you would like.
But like the CDC is like, people know of this. I think the CDC is like an accessible resource.
I think a lot will change here in the next 30 days after the election, maybe not. But at the same time, again, if I can get you arguing about the wrong question, there is no right answer to it. And so often if you're a good debater, and we'll talk about some of this today, the tactic is to suck you in to the wrong question so that you can't see it's the wrong question. And you'll spend your emotional energy and time debating the wrong question when there is no right answer to the wrong question. what's the wrong question when it comes to COVID-19? The wrong question is things probably, this is, again, just my opinion about social distancing and wearing masks and getting people arguing about that, and what to do about it. If you look at this, and these are the CDC statistics, these aren't Charlie's statistics, they are lower than the seasonal flu mortality-wise. And I put out a post not long ago just saying, are they lower because of our response? Probably. But as an entrepreneur, or as an entrepreneur who handles more risk or who takes on more risk by definition, I have been conditioned to always look at both sides. Here's the decision. Here's decision A. Mm-hmm. What's it cost? Here's decision B. What does it cost? In government, when you have a lot of people that only have to look at option A and what it costs versus option A and option B and what they both cost, it's not as difficult to make a decision that might be rooted and grounded in fear, because the most important thing, or one of the most important things for you, is you need to keep your job. And so it is more important for most politicians to make decisions that have less liability when it comes to people's thoughts about the decision they made than it is what risk do I take, knowing that both are risks and both have costs. And so just take the restaurant industry. Mildly, the projection is that we'll lose at least a third. I think it's going to be closer to half of the restaurants in this country will be gone because of our response to COVID-19 and how much we have scared people with the threat of the virus, when now we know, 72 years old and older, that it's still 0.5% mortality-wise. So you take the population and you say 0.5% could, 1% could die from this, which is less than the seasonal flu. What's the cost on the other side of that? One restaurant, it's not uncommon for someone to have a second mortgage on their home, or to have spent $1 million of their own money for, a husband and wife team or an individual owner in order to start that restaurant. And that's what it took to get it up and going and to keep it going for 2 to 3 years. Mm-hmm. And now they lose all of that.
Right.
It's been said about depression, suicide, different forms of child abuse, sexual abuse, all of the things that have come with such a dramatic shift in our culture and our society. And so as an entrepreneur, you're faced, because the government's not backing my decisions. The government isn't writing checks to my employees. That's something that I have to do, which means I'm forced to make a decision knowing that there is risk with both decisions, and I need to make the best decision with the least amount of risk on either of those sides. And so I've just said that when you have, public school administrators or government officials saying, shut it all down, we'll just shut it all down, that's the safest thing. You're arguing over and debating the wrong question. The right question is, with a mortality rate, and I know this is more recent information, and so I'm not faulting people that made the best decision they could make early on when we did not know this information. But especially now, the right question is, in light of a mortality rate that is comparable to or less than the seasonal flu, what is the appropriate response in the context of overall society and culture, knowing that there is a lot of loss with any decision that we make? Mm-hmm. And so the crazy thing about all of this is there will always be a segment of the population, or those that are in control and in power, that use fear to direct people and to get them to make decisions. Always. That's the history of mankind.
And what's so frustrating about that is it feels like we're powerless to that.
Well, again,
if the government is going to say, you can't operate your business, or you have to wear a mask, or you have to do this and this and this,
yeah, sure.
What do you do?
I will purposefully vote for people I normally would not vote for, primarily as a way to vote people out of power that, in my opinion, violated the Constitution and started making decisions as if they had to think for people. I and it's just me, and I'm open to being wrong and often am wrong, but it just comes back to government officials were elected to serve people, not think for them. Mm-hmm. And did I understand and was I on board with initially pausing while we tried to figure out what was going on? Yeah, I think that made sense. But as we have continued to not lighten things up or loosen things up as we have figured it out more, I just am against elected officials who are supposed to be public servants thinking that it is their responsibility to think and make decisions for people. And that's a common temptation for anyone that is in power.
Sure.
Is to think that you are the boss or you are the manager in order to think for people versus serve people and help them think better based on the information that you're receiving. But all of this just comes back to, take it outside of COVID-19. It is rarely what you go through that kills you. It is often how you respond to what you go through that kills you. And this study is just a very, very small example where your mental clarity and approach to your thoughts about the disease has a significant impact on how long these people were in the hospital and whether or not they survived it. Mm-hmm. And again, that's more than just COVID-19. Like, thoughts are fuel, thoughts are food, thoughts alter our biology. It seems hard or difficult for people, if you're sitting at home right now and you're a stay-at-home mom, or you're a manager at work, or you own your own business, like, we underestimate the power of our thoughts because it goes from thoughts to words, and words create realities. Everything that we see, everything that we interact with came from a thought that turned into a word that people put action behind. Our thoughts are just that important.
Did I ever tell you about the time I faked strep throat?
Where you ended up getting it?
Yeah.
Because
I called into work and I lied and I said it. I was still living at my parents'. I called into work and said I had strep throat because I needed like a real good, like, I couldn't just say I had a cold.
Yeah.
So I had to get pretty serious about it. And I stayed at home, and my parents were out of town, laid in their bed and watched movies all day long, didn't do a thing. And then they came back. I was ready to go back to work, and I actually got strep throat. Yeah. Awkward calling into work.
Yeah.
It's
I
back.
got it again. Sorry, guys. But that's true. And so, you think about, you just pause for a moment and think about everything that everyone is going through and how, like, inundated we are right now with bad news. I have a very good friend whose family is like in the news business, and someone said to one of their family members who's a decision maker in this news business, like, I wish the news was more about good stories, right?
Yeah.
Positive things.
Yeah.
And what they responded, and it's true, is that those things don't get people's attention the way negative, fear-oriented stories do. Right. And the reason for that, we know this, talking about neurology and studying the brain's job is to project the worst thing possible in order to get you prepared and ready for it. Like, it's your threat detector.
So that's what I was saying. That's what I was asking about with, like, the gap between, like, there is this data and then there are people who are feeling an immense amount of fear. So you're saying it's kind of neurological. Well,
again, running a security, growing up in and running a security firm for as long as I have, we do something called a threat assessment, where a company will call us to come in and investigate a situation and write up a threat assessment. The large local hospital here in the area, we did a threat assessment, and it took 2 months just to look at every single door, every single facility, every single department, how people moved in and out, how they handled their emergency room, all of those things, what kind of hinges they had on their doors in case someone wanted to break in or break out, like all of those things. And it ended up being several hundred pages of a threat assessment. And all we were doing is we were telling this organization everything about themselves, because you get sucked in and you can't see for yourself what you're going through sometimes and how you would respond if something did happen. And so that is the role of the brain, is to constantly run threat assessments. And if you don't know that, you will listen to everything your brain says. That's part of the problem. Talking about the real reason everything happens for a reason. If you're not careful, you will end up allowing your brain to be boss, and you'll never question its thoughts when all it's doing is saying, what's the worst thing that could happen here? And the idea behind that is, how should I respond to this if that happens? And so you have to be suspicious of your brain, know that it's nothing more than a tool amidst a larger organization with a lot more people at the boardroom table. And you got to listen to what the threat is just to be aware of it. But like when the president sits with his council and there's 15 people or 12 people around that table, the person giving the threat assessment in worst case scenario is just one voice at that table. And we've got to learn to do the same with our brain, because our brain, like the shape of our brain and the chemistry of our brain changes based on how much authority we give to those worst case scenarios. And so most people end up being a reflection or a mirror of the worst case scenario, which lowers your body's frequency, hertz, which is how many times something vibrates per second, because it's constantly bombarded or weighed down by the worst case scenario. And so if I told you that you're going to walk out of this room or you're about to get a phone call because another child shut your child's hand in the door at daycare and broke their hand, and they've already called the ambulance, like, just do an assessment right now of how your body, like how your chest feels of hearing that as you start to think about one of your daughter's hand being broken in a door at daycare. Extremely realistic situation. But if I flip it and say, hey, you've done such a great job at work, I want to reward you with a trip to the Caribbean where all of the expenses are going to be paid. Like, it's different.
Right.
Your biology is different. You respond to it differently. And so when we get stuck in a state where we're constantly, do you want to take that trip? When we're constantly entertaining the worst case scenario.
Yes.
Yeah. When our bodies react differently. Do you want to comment?
No.
But
Okay.
you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so
That's a good example too. Like I'm sure people they can feel the examples like bodily.
Yeah. And so when that becomes chronic, when that becomes a part of your normal thing, or maybe you have unprocessed childhood trauma where that's normal for your brain to listen to that what could go wrong narrative, you end up vibing at a certain level or operating at a certain frequency. And that's the exact, whatever your frequency is. So they say that you should have a frequency overall, if you average all of your organs and all of your thoughts, that you should have somewhere around 60 to 64 hertz during the day, sometimes 67, but at night it goes up near 80. We know that the common cold sets in around 37 hertz when your average, your vibrating or your movement, your vitality is around 37 hertz. Cancer sets in around 35 to 32 hertz. Like, we have these numbers that there's some science behind. You can raise them or lower them based upon your response to what you're going through. Everyone needs to hear me say this. It's not what you're going through that lowers your hertz as much as your response to what you're going through, which means you've got to question your thoughts or put them in their appropriate place in context of everything else. And so if that's the case, we also know that like frequencies attract like frequencies. So if you average a very low frequency, those are the people that you're going to attract to yourself. Those are the thoughts that you're going to attract to yourself in your life. And someone will say, well, I don't know how that happens, or I don't necessarily believe that's the case. Like, I can't imagine how that would work. Well, just reverse engineer it. If thoughts are creating that feeling in you, which is an undeniable feeling that is lower than if you get that trip to the Caribbean or you're awarded that job or whatever it is, you want to be around people that have a higher vibe.
Yeah.
And I don't have to give you a lot of evidence other than if you're someone that struggles with a low vibe, look at the situations and the people you're constantly attracting to yourself. It's on that same plane. And you know, I would suggest that you pick up just some material on the quantum realm, quantum physics, quantum mechanics, read some of Einstein's work that basically just says that everything in life is energy, and that we attract like energy. And so you have to, and this is completely consistent with a biblical narrative, that we have to live our life by faith in what we believe versus our thoughts and what we feel.
It reminds me of the conversations we have about having a life other people want to be a part of.
Yeah.
Because we all know those people that are kind of like Eeyore.
Sure.
Just like super heavy. And
for sure.
Every time that they share what they're going through and you try and like spin it in a positive way, not to take away from what they're going through, but just to, I don't know, offer a little bit of hope. And they push back on it.
Yeah.
And it's like the most exhausting thing in the world.
Sure. I have a good friend. Hi, good friend.
Hey, good friend.
That said to me the other day, I said, how are you? And they said, I'm good, but I would like for this and this to be out of my life. And it was something really practical.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, cool. I know what you're saying. But the reality of it is there is always going to be a this and a this. Always. Always. You hope there's always going to be a this and a this, or it means you're not moving and you're not growing.
Yeah.
Right? I put out or reposted on my feed something that someone put out there on Instagram the other day that said, grow through what you go through. And you want to go through things so that you can grow. And if you think you're ever going to get to a place where you don't have a challenge or something that wants to occupy your mind or steal your peace, you're crazy.
Yep.
Sometimes I have friends that we talk about our American Express bill, right? And it's a part of doing business. Mm-hmm. Having big bills and big liabilities is a part of business. If you can't manage your mind in having liabilities, you can't grow exponentially. Debt is a part of it. Liabilities are a part of it. You've got to be able to mitigate the risk with saying, this is just something that comes with it. It's that verse in Proverbs 14 that says, where the stall or the crib is clean, there are no oxen.
Yeah.
And the idea is, if you want to produce a big harvest, you got to have big oxen, and big oxen take big dumps. And so if you're afraid of the crap that comes along with a big harvest, guess what? That's cool. Keep your clean little crib and don't worry about it, and feel good about the fact that there's no crap in your life. The problem with it is you're going to grow nothing, all for the sake of you feeling better about not having to worry about anything.
Look at you using appropriate language.
I know. I'm
keeping it PG.
This is a clean podcast most of the time.
So I hear what you're saying about like your thoughts are food. But I guess I want permission to not have every thought be super positive. Like that. Well, I don't know if realistic is the right word, but it just doesn't feel authentic to me.
Sure. So let's get into the psychology of all this.
Okay.
There's 3 psychological terms that psychologists use to explain this: focalism, durability bias, and impact bias. And it's just what comes from studying the brain when people go through hard times. And focalism is our body or brain's tendency to get so sucked into the emotion behind what we're going through that we can see nothing else.
Like tunnel vision.
Yeah, tunnel vision is a good way to say it. Genesis 25, the story of Jacob and Esau. Two brothers. Esau is a hunter. Jacob is a chef. And Jacob is making food, and his brother gets too far out from the home and almost dies getting back, and he's starving. He comes in, he smells Jacob's food. Jacob is the younger brother. This is thousands of years ago. Esau is the older brother. In that time of pre-antiquity, the older brother got twice as much of an inheritance as the younger brother. And so Esau, the older brother, comes in. He's been hunting. He's half dead. He's starving. He says, I've got to have some of your food. Jacob says, fine, I'll sell it to you, but I want your birthright. I want that position where I get 2 to 1. You take the 1, I'll take the 2, in light of you taking 2 right now. And Esau says, well, I'm going to be dead anyways if I don't eat. Fine, take it. And he gives it to him. What's happening there, which this is crazy, but it happens all the time. Esau is so focused in on the energy and motion, right? That's an emotion, energy and motion, about how he feels that he can't go and get vegetables or something himself. He wants the hot food that his brother has made immediately because of how he feels. And so he sells his birthright.
Yeah.
He literally alters the trajectory of the rest of his life because of how he feels in one moment. And it's called focalism. It's a psychological term where we get so sucked into not the moment, but the energy that is in motion. I'm going to die if this doesn't happen.
Yeah.
That we make decisions that we would not make otherwise. And so then focalism is made up of 2 components. One is impact bias, that we always think what we're going through in the immediate moment is going to have more of an impact than it actually does. And durability bias, that it's going to last longer than we do, than it actually does. Yeah. The example with durability bias on that most people use is, and this is good because you're a mother, if you were told or asked the question, how do you think you would feel 7 years from now if you lost one of your children tomorrow? What durability bias says is that you would not be able to think about 7 years from now. You would practice focalism and focus in on the fact that you lost a child.
Sure.
And so durability bias says, yes, losing a child is absolutely horrible. But for that 7 years, there's going to be, 2,000 days, and there's going to be a lot of other things that happen in those 2,000 days. And though you will never probably live a day that you don't think about the child that you lost, their life is going to go on. Yeah. And so when it comes to how to survive the worst day of your life, you have to understand that 9 times out of 10, if not more, it's our response to what we go through, and it's our beliefs that enable us to have the right response to what we go through. That is just as important, if not more important, than what we actually go through. But see, we're emotional beings because every thought, the bridge between thoughts and realities are emotions. That I have a thought that creates an emotion that turns into words, that turns into realities. And the advice or the thing to take away from here is that we've got to do a really good job of understanding the role that emotions play in creating realities, because then we can be a part of creating greater realities and more positive realities for ourselves and for those around us, versus getting so sucked into the moment that we get overwhelmed and can do nothing but think about or be overwhelmed by the thing that went wrong versus our response to what went wrong. I said to you yesterday, like we were dealing with a situation at work, that you should never forfeit the opportunity of apologizing. Mm-hmm. Messing up is an incredible opportunity to demonstrate redemption in the fact that you're a human being. Never, ever, ever waste an opportunity to own your mistakes and apologize. Never wish away your hardships. Your hardships are what define you. Your hardships are what give you your opportunities. Your hardships are what Book of James, Jesus' half-brother, says, be joyful when you get them, because those are the real stepping stones. Those are the stairs to your destiny. That's how you get there. Mm-hmm. And so you look at the life of Joseph, someone that faced extreme injustice on multiple occasions. Somehow he knew that his response, not those injustices, but his response to those injustices was what his potential was riding on. And so the role of the brain, just understanding focalism, like you are not unusual when you get so overwhelmed that you can't think about anything else but that moment. The challenge and the opportunity is to confront focalism and to understand impact bias and durability, and to know that this might be horrible in the moment, but where we go from here determines whether or not this is going to be something that serves me or harms me, something that sets me up for the rest of my life or sets me back for the rest of my life.
So what is that next step then?
Get rid of it. Get rid of it. And it is whatever you're afraid of. You've got to get to the place where you're not afraid of losing it or starting over. The only reason that we freak is because we think something can be taken from us. Get rid of what you're afraid of losing and life changes.
Okay. So how do you do that? I mean, because I hear what you're saying and it's good and I'm on board. It's just practically speaking, if your kid dies,
sure.
I mean, we're saying that, we're using it as an example, and I think it's a good example, but that's real.
Sure.
That is a big
horrible
example.
And it's horrible.
Yeah. So it almost sounds a little flippant to say just get rid of, be fine.
This is coming from someone, myself, who has walked beside, I've never lost a child, but I've walked beside two families that have.
Yeah.
And their life has gone on.
Right.
And there is a hole in their heart that they can't wait to be reunited with their sons. Both of them lost a son. Their life is going on, and they've had an incredible impact on our community based on their response. And again, this is where your beliefs matter. Everyone believes in something. Everyone has faith in something. An atheist just has more faith in their thoughts that God does not exist than the religious person that does believe God exists. And that's why we're to go on the journey of science, which is a verb where we go on a journey to figure out what adheres to the truth. And you have to shape and form your beliefs, and that will affect how you respond to certain things. In both of these families' situation, they believe that they'll be reunited. I talk about all the time the Proof of Heaven books and To Heaven and Back, different life after
the afterlife, after death, life after death,
encounters, whatever.
Okay, you get it. Everyone gets it.
But it just comes back to there's an abundance of proof out there, that enough proof to latch onto something, and still yet not enough certainty to be able to do it by check marks without faith, right? Faith is still necessary, but it just comes back to everyone has faith in someone or something. These families have faith that they're going to be reunited. And I say all of that little section about an after-death experience, to say that this life is just a fraction. If you believe in eternity and being reunited with our loved ones in heaven and in eternity, it's not even a fraction of eternity, this life. And so you go with, though it's hard at times, the cards that you're dealt, and you make the most of it. You respond. You can't control if you lose a child, but you can control your response. And it's taken these families years, now approaching a decade, to manage their emotions and their thoughts about it. But at the end of the day, it just comes back to you can survive the worst day of your life when you learn to keep things in perspective and know that it's your response to what you're going through that shapes that moment in moving forward. Yeah. And it's not to be insensitive either. It's very hard stuff. And most people will not have to deal with the loss of a child. Most people are dealing with a lack of income, right? Or losing a job or losing a significant other. What the invitation is, and this is what I meant by get rid of it. It is anything outside of you that is telling you you need it to be happy, whole, and content.
I was just having this conversation a couple days ago with a young woman who is unmarried and really wants to be married.
Sure.
And I'm like, I get it. I didn't get married until a little bit later in life. And those were some good days. Like
sure.
My single days were good days because marriage is hard. Yeah. Like, you talk about that, like the staircase and our challenges that should grow. They should be getting more challenging as we grow. And so I'm like, you need to just embrace where you are. This is good.
Yeah.
Like see everything around you that is good. Don't
yeah.
see what you're lacking. And that's, a phrase that we say a lot is that we have everything that we need. Like I have everything that
sure.
I need. And I think that's such an important practice that people can say like every single day or every single moment. Like even if you lose your child, you have everything that you need.
Yeah.
Even if you lose your spouse, you have everything that you need. Like regardless of what the loss is, you still have everything that you need.
Well, and it's why we say nothing added, nothing taken away.
Yeah.
Right? Like you are who you are. You're valuable with nothing added, nothing taken away. Yeah. And the recipe for misery is when you need someone or something to be complete or to be whole. Yeah. It is an absolute disaster. But you can see where focalism, with the example of that young woman who is not married that wants to be married, she's experiencing focalism. And the idea behind that is if the emotion that she's dealing with is probably loneliness, and that emotion is so overwhelming that a lot of what she thinks about is if I can get rid of this loneliness, I will be happy. And I said this in premarital counseling earlier this year with a couple that I was doing premarital counseling with, and just said that. Don't think that because you're now going to get married and you've waited all of this time that your spouse is going to complete you.
But that's like the trick that we all like kind of believe.
Sure.
Not just our spouse, but like if I just get that job or if I just reach that level of income or
sure.
if I get that car or if I have that kid, like, and then you just aren't satisfied. Yeah.
Well, it's always going to be the next thing. And that's why wherever you are, like this is Jedi stuff.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of, my mind is wild, obviously. It just runs all over the place. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of Kung Fu Panda 2, the way it opens, where he's just catching raindrops, and redirecting them because of the level of gentleness that is, and he's saying inner peace, just practicing the storm has to be calm or conquered on the inside, everyone. Everything in your life will be a storm on the outside until you conquer the storm within. Jesus is in the bottom of a boat with his disciples. They're taking on water and he's sleeping. Why? Because he had inner peace. And so he gets up, shakes his head, stands up, looks at the wind and the waves and rebukes them and tells them to stop. And then he just kind of goes back down to where he was sleeping, all the while saying, like, how much longer am I going to be with you guys? Just like this, you guys are the ones that tempt me to not have peace. Mm-hmm. You're the ones that put a storm on the inside because you are so affected by what's going on the outside of you. The people that tax the heck out of us, right? Like that just wear us out are people who have such a storm around them all of the time that's coming. They think it's outside. It's inside. Yeah. The storm is inside. Well, if I could just do this, if I could just get this taken care of, I would be so much better. No, you're going to graduate to a new level of complexity. You're going to graduate to a new level of problems. And what it all comes back to is, how do you position yourself to be content and have inner peace wherever you are? The storm is never the outside storm. It's always the inside storm. And so when you keep attracting people and business deals and partners and situations to yourself, it's because you have a hurricane on the inside of you, and you constantly want to look outside of you at other people and other situations and say, if I just got rid of that, I would be okay. You're never going to get rid of that, because that is coming like a magnet to be paired with what's on the inside of you.
So then if people are able to identify like, oh, I have the hurricane inside of me, what do they do?
Well, I think I would do an audit, right? I would do an audit to say, what is it that I think I need in order to be happy? And then I would actively, on a daily basis through journaling, just giving you one example, I would actively confront that. And, you know, if you're brave or you're here like our courageous co-host, I would actively undermine it and take it on. Right? So if your weakness is you need to be accepted by others, or maybe you've been in a position of responsibility your whole life and you're tempted to view your value and your worth by what you can accomplish or how you can live between the guardrails or the lines of what everybody has set for you or what the industry has set for you, then maybe you be okay with not being great all the time or not making all of the right decisions. Like,
you know what I think? Sorry, go ahead.
Well, all I was going to say is, and then I want to hear your thoughts, is you're not your good or bad decisions.
Yeah. It's
nothing added, nothing taken away to include your ability to fulfill your role.
Yeah. Something that I think is a really helpful practice is, because the Jacob and Esau example, like, I completely get it.
Sure.
I've done some really weird things because I've been hungry.
Sure. No doubt.
And so I think fasting is to me, that's like a really good practice of like, I am at peace and I am okay, even though I feel like I could eat an elephant right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Food is a very powerful thing, because it, like your thoughts, directly reshapes your chemistry when you put it in your body.
Last night, it was just me and the girls, and I didn't eat dinner until like 8:30, and I could feel myself, like, they were just getting under my skin, and I don't think they were actually doing anything different than they normally do. I was just hungry.
Sure.
And so I'm like, okay, I need to pause and get myself together, because I'm just hangry right now.
Sure. I was in the garage last night, and I was frustrated because there's this like big wheel in our garage that has been there for 10 years.
Like an actual kid's?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a 15-year-old, 11-year-old, and a 9-year-old. I've been trying to throw this away. Ask my wife. I've been trying to throw this away for 10 years.
Okay.
It just takes up space, though they still use it, I guess.
Oh.
So I was told last night in our garage, and it just drives me crazy. And so bikes and skateboards and balls were everywhere.
Yes.
And I was just frustrated.
Sure.
And so I'm moving things around, and I had said, one thing or another, and Kate goes, who's my 9-year-old daughter, who's a boss, 8 on the Enneagram, she says, "Dad, it's not Sunday." And I said, "Excuse me?" She goes, "Sundays, you do church, you're a little tired, and you're a little cranky."
That's your day. You get to be cranky at home.
Yeah.
I love it.
I'm like,
pull yourself together, Dad. It's Monday.
Did she just say
call
that
you out? Yes.
I'm cranky on Sundays?
Well, that too.
But yeah, so fasting is a great one, right? Because you put yourself in a dying experience, and then you have to control your thoughts. And that's what you're going to see when you put yourself in a situation where you're not giving the body what it wants. Like, you're not entertaining that thought that your brain typically goes to of worst case scenario. The body fights back. Another one that you can do if you contact Body Garage Dayton is periodically we do ice baths, where we will fill up a horse trough with lots and lots and lots of ice. We'll put water in it, and it's very cold temperatures. And then you get in a bathing suit. I love doing it in winter. It's amazing. But you get in, and then we coach you, because we're putting you in a controlled, dying environment. Sounds wild. But what happens is, when we put you in that environment, your brain goes wild trying to tell you things. I can't do this. It starts affecting your lungs and you can start to hyperventilate. We've had people that have literally seized up because they've had so much trauma in them where they have become a victim of their emotions and their circumstance and their trauma that two of us had to grab them and pull them up because their body literally shut down. Sound familiar? Oh yeah. You start to go through something, you start to anticipate the worst through focalism or impact bias, and your body shuts down. You can't move, you can't talk, you can't do anything. And so we'll use an ice bath to put you in those situations and then train you how to think when you're in the middle of what your body and brain thinks to be dying. That's what they do, what our government does with like our special forces. They constantly put them in environments where their brain tells them they cannot survive this and they're dying. Why? So when they get in war and they're outnumbered 200 to 10, right? That's a real scenario. They don't think for a second about dying. They think about operating. Why? Because they've confronted the focalism, impact bias, and durability bias of surviving the worst day of their life.
And I think that's such a good point because of course all of us want our military men and women to be able to handle that stuff. And so think of all the people that depend on you or who you want like to be looking up to you. Like you should be able to do that too.
Right.
Your kids want and need you to be able to handle that, your employees, all of that.
That's why every threat is an opportunity in disguise. Is just understanding that it's the threats, it's the injustices, it's the unfairness, it's the challenges, it's the things you think you can't survive that are your opportunities in disguise. That's good. And so the way that you survive the worst day of your life is you be aware of things like focalism, impact bias, and durability bias and say, no, you know what? The most important thing right now is my beliefs, and I'm going to let my beliefs dictate my response to this versus my emotions. And you're going to suck at it at first because your beliefs versus your feelings, it's like a teeter-totter, and they're going to be as strong as you feed them. And so if you live your life based on your feelings are going to be really, really big and your beliefs are going to be small. If you constantly work at feeding your beliefs and starving your feelings, then your beliefs are going to dictate your feelings, and feelings follow good beliefs, and that's what you want. You want them in that order. That's the horse in front of the cart versus the cart in front of the horse. My beliefs lead my feelings don't lead my beliefs. Yeah. And so when you invest in one, I had a friend, actually, when Rich Fresh was here on the podcast, he is a tailor, right, and makes all of the custom suits and outfits for different people out in LA. And he's like, I'm going to get your measurements before you leave. And when he was measuring my legs, like my right leg is thicker and bigger than my left, just barely, but it is because I use it more. Right. And specifically when I am in the summer and I'm running a lot, all of us have one leg that's bigger than the other. And that's kind of like a good picture for our beliefs versus our feelings. Whatever you use the most is going to be bigger, which means I've got to get in the habit, especially when I feel weak with my beliefs, of purposely strengthening them daily so that they will grow and eventually dominate my feelings versus my feelings dominating my beliefs.
Yeah, that's good. That's such a random but helpful picture.
I like those random pictures. But I mean, that's what it comes back to. We were made to have influence with others, which means you've got to survive a number of those worst days of your life. And it's based on your response to the worst day of your life that makes your life better. Mm-hmm. That's the bigger threat to your life, is your response to the worst day of your life. Mm-hmm. And so don't wish away the worst days of your life. Just be aware of things like focalism and impact bias and durability bias, and you'll be fine.
Easy.
Well, it's not easy, but you're just talking to someone that has been through a number of those days. And so again, if you're going to grow through what you go through, you just got to go through it. And there's a language, there's a fragrance, there's an aroma, there's a vibe that comes from people that have been through things and survived it. And it's why we don't freak out much. And you know when you're in the presence of one of those people, because they're not screaming or not panicking when everything goes south. We'll end with this. Several months ago, I think it was during the pandemic, you know that I was down in Florida working, and we were near the ocean one day, and a dad and mom, and I think we told this story on the podcast, were out with like probably a 10-year-old on just this concrete like ravine that was about 20 to 30 yards out into the ocean. And the mother slipped and sliced her leg open by her calf to where the muscle was coming out of her skin. And I immediately, when I saw them coming toward us, saw what was going on and grabbed the medical kit that was there. And my chief responsibility or priority in that moment was calm, right? That calm is contagious. And I could tell that it was bad and that she was going to need to be stitched up pretty well because her calf was coming out.
Yeah. Okay.
But though I, got the iodine out and took care of her and got it all cleaned up and wrapped up, like that wasn't my number one job to stop the bleeding. I knew I could do that. I knew that I had to calm her down to make her life better and my job easier. Why? Because if she continued to be anxious, her heart would pump at a faster rate and a stronger rate, which means she was going to lose more blood faster. If I could be calm and not let what I was seeing calm her down, my energy calm her energy down, then things would be fine because her heart would slow down and she would stop losing as much blood as she was. That is the opportunity that you have as a leader and as a mother and as a spouse or a grandparent, is when you experience the worst day of your life to realize that life doesn't happen in a vacuum. There are many consequences to our response to the worst day of our life. Yeah. And that is what gives us and others our next opportunity.
Well, and how we respond to other people's worst days of their life.
Sure.
Not just our response to our own bad days.
Yeah, 100%. Episode 36. Emotion ships, where everything... Oh, wait, hold on. We talk about the real reason everything happens for a reason.
Strong finish.
That's why Gilman is here.